Hello, everybody. This is Teen Title Talk with Erin.
And Yahira.
This is the podcast
where two librarians discuss two YA books every 2 weeks.
Obviously, today Courtney's out, Yahira is in, and we'll be talking about two graphic novels. I'm going to be reading They Called Us Enemy by George Takei.
And I was reading I Was Their American Dream by Malaka Gharib.
Before we do that, we're going to dip into the Jar of Teen Angst. This is always fun because, we've never done the Jar of Teen Angst before, so I get to learn a little bit about you. The first question is, did you have any nicknames as a teen? Were they good, bad, ugly?
Well, I didn't have a standard nickname across. It was more like I had friends that would call me a nickname. Like, my name is Yahira, so I had one of my friends, her name was Rebecca, and she would call me Yaha.
Yaha. Okay.
So
it was like a shortened.
It was just a shortening of my name. But aside from that, I really didn't. People just called me by my full name, Yahira.
That's so nice for you. I had so many not great nicknames and some pleasant ones, but I had one like that where my sisters just called me Erin, short for Erin, right? Erin's a nice nickname. It's fine. And then I had a bunch of weird nicknames that kind of were put on me. So at one point, I just decided to give myself a nickname / alter ego. And I don't remember exactly how it evolved, but we were in TA, or advisory, right? Yeah. Which is what they call it now, I think, in general. And I was talking about how, what if I could stomp around so that I could crack the tiles on the floor? And then out of that evolved this silly little persona called Thunder Chunk the Barbarian. And so then my friends started calling me Chunk. And then I was called Chunk for years and years and years. And I'm kind of okay with that because I love Chunk from the Goonies, and I like the word chunk. It's fun to say. Yeah. But I would hate it if somebody called me Chunk now. It was totally different then. But if someone was like, hey, Chunk, I'd be like, no thanks. Can you just call me Erin? Or Air, as people call me in general. Now people call me Air. So, all right. Well, your friends were nice, and that's good. How about siblings? Did you have any siblings? Were you a lot alike or very different?
I am the second of 5 children. Okay. And I am smashed in between 2 boys.
Okay, gotcha. Older brother, younger brother.
Older brother, younger brother. And there's not another girl until the very end, and she's 9 years younger than I am.
Okay. So did you guys ever hang out, play, or were you kind of surrogate mom for her? Or did you not see her at all because it was kind of totally different schedules at that point?
I didn't really see her not only because of different schedules, but also because we weren't living together. Mm-hmm. She was living with her dad.
Gotcha.
Especially during my teen years, she was living with her dad, and I was actually living with my brother that was directly after me. And my dad.
Gotcha.
So growing up, there were times when we lived together, but there were plenty of times when we did not live at all together. In my early teens, she was just a nuisance.
Of course, as they are.
And as for my brothers, my younger brother was he's only 2 years younger than I. He was always trying to avoid being seen even with me because we look so different. Oh. And because we look so different, he was concerned that girls might think that we were together.
What? How embarrassing that would be, though.
Exactly.
have to have that conversation.
Ironically, he's one of my best friends now.
Oh, yeah. That's good. That's good.
How about you?
I had my older sister, Amber, which I was closest with. She was 2 years older than me. She is 2 years older than me. And then there was a gap. So Casey and Moe. Casey was 5 years younger than me, and Moe was 7. So similarly, they were around. I drove them places because at one point I finally got my license and my mom was working, and it was like, you have to drop so-and-so off here or there or everywhere. So I kind of shuttled them around and was their older sibling / caretaker at times. I do remember a game where they would run ferociously at me at the same time when they were little, and I would take one and throw them into the other because it would be the best way to repel both of them at once. But they were amazing. They would retaliate. They just both jump up and run again like little zombies, and I'd take another one.
Yeah.
Like bowling.
And as far as they're concerned, they were having the best time ever.
Know.
Probably.
Even though I was trying to do them harm.
You were trying to get them, get away from me. But,
stop doing that.
But they were like, no, yes, this is
it
so
was
much fun.
Delightful for them, I'm sure. I remember their giggles. But yeah, now we're all close, really. We text regularly. But Amber's in Cambridge, so we see Amber the most.
That's nice.
And the kids.
No, we're spread out all over the place.
Everywhere. It's just like...
I have one sibling in Connecticut, one in New York City, one in Michigan, so we rarely see each other. However, I am meeting with my older brother who lives in Connecticut this coming weekend.
That's nice, yeah.
So every once in a while we do get together.
That is nice. And get the cousins together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rarely all four of us.
Yeah, it is hard to all be in one place. Also, though, when you get all four together, it's a lot.
Yes, it is a lot.
Because we went on family vacation, and I was just like, this is a lot for me. But it's all like 6 kids under the age of,
Yeah.
6.
Oh, no.
6 kids under 6.
Our children are spread out because my older brother was a young father.
Right.
So I was much later. So it's like I have a 22-year-old niece and I have a 4-year-old nephew.
Right. Right. Exactly.
And I have a 4-year-old grandnephew.
But then the olders can look after the youngers.
Yes.
That's great.
So you can just send them off.
Awesome. All right, let's talk about books. So you read I Was Their American Dream. Tell me a little bit about it.
So I Was Their American Dream is a graphic memoir by Malaka Gharib. So she's Filipino-Egyptian is the way that she identifies herself. Her mother being Filipino, her father being Egyptian. They met in California, got married. Malaka.
I love it.
So it's about her growing up with this sort of blended family, highly influenced by the Filipino side of her family. And in Cerritos, California, which is apparently a very diverse city. And wanting to fit into what is the American dream. What is the American dream per her family's perception, which is to have what is called the American dream. A house, a car, a good job,
a fence,
a family, the fence around the house, etc., etc. And her parents don't truly achieve that because they end up getting divorced and the father moves back to Egypt.
And so no pressure on her. She's
whatsoever, especially not by her very extended Filipino family, all of which live in a 5-mile radius.
Oh, perfect. Okay, gotcha. Awesome. And I read They Called Us Enemy by George Takei, which was another graphic memoir, and it's based on his childhood. Actually, it goes over a lot of his life. It starts when he was 5 years old, and he has this memory of, he talks about how it's a searing memory of how he was dressed really hurriedly in the morning and told to go outside, and his mom arrives out there, and she has a duffel bag, and his sister, and he can still see it. Her tears are streaming down her face, and basically they're being moved to an internment camp. This is right after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So they're taking all the Japanese Americans without any, due process and saying, you are a Japanese American, you look like the people who bombed us, and we're putting you into incarceration. And so you follow his, basically his life story. A lot of it focuses on when he was living in the internment camp, and you see it all from a very childlike view, and you also get a lot of history going through it as he grows. You also feel a lot of how he evolves as a human, I think. Like, he's growing into his teenage years, and he has this sense of did dad do the right thing? Did mom and dad do the right thing? And he has these arguments with his dad, and then kind of looking back as an older person and saying how arrogant and youthful he was then. And So you really see all the way through his life. It's a stunning graphic novel, I think. It gave me a lot to think about. It made me very emotional in a lot of different ways. I was angry. I was sad. I was happy that the kids were able to see life through sort of rose-colored glasses when their parents were sheltering them. It was just a beautiful graphic novel. So I'm excited to talk more about it.
Yay.
Let's talk about yours first. I have a few questions. Mm-hmm. So Kirkus calls your book a heartwarming tribute to immigrant families and their descendants trying to live the American dream. And I obviously love a good heartwarming story, especially one where it's a true story. Can you give us a taste of a moment that felt heartwarming to you?
So I guess I would say heartwarming, especially in that whole immigrant families and their descendants, is that Malaka goes off to college in Syracuse, and she's grown up in Cerritos and going summers to Egypt to visit her father. And now she's by her own choice in this completely different environment.
Right.
And she realizes how much she actually misses her family.
Okay, gotcha. She just wants that home.
Yes,
feeling, yeah.
Especially because Cerritos was so diverse and Syracuse was the complete opposite. Again, she was choosing that. That's what she was choosing. That was what she was going through, because she was trying to come to that American dream. And the perception of the American dream is to have this education and also to try to blend in with white people.
Okay, gotcha. Gotcha.
There's no other way around it.
Well, that brings me to the next question, because I was reading the synopsis and it was saying it grapples with a lot of things. It deals with identity and culture and code switches. And it sounds like it talks about hanging on to cultural values, and I think it said versus being the all-American kid. And these two things always seem to be like in opposition to each other. And I was just curious as to, throughout the book, if she felt she had to choose one or the other, or what is the all-American kid look like versus how she felt she was at, what is it? Why is it always opposite? Why is it not one thing?
Okay, so because there's this perception of other. Mm-hmm. And it's in the book, and it's in our general culture, right? That there are others. However,
like
a lot of times
she would be feeling
like other, like
people
for example,
would be making her feel like other as well. Both. Okay, gotcha.
Both at the same time. Like, she's Filipino Egyptian, and she went to this very highly diverse high school, but there were no other Filipino Egyptians.
Right, got it.
So she didn't fit into any of the groups.
Okay.
Yet, she was called. Like she was trying to be a poser, which was a very big insult, because it's like she's being a faker. And she was actually punk, and she was into doing signs, and she was into skating. And all of that didn't fit into how she looked on the outside.
I see. Okay.
So, and she wanted to write for Spin magazine.
I think that's so fun. She's just pursuing her dreams.
Exactly, which you would think is the all-American dream.
That's what it feels like.
But from the immigrant perspective, the all-American dream really is to go to the pinnacle of having the job that can give you the most amount of money, so you can have this big house and drive these expensive cars and have the fence and have the family and be able to buy the expensive handbags and all of that stuff. So her family's pushing her to be a doctor or a lawyer or a business person. And in the meanwhile, she's more artsy-like.
Interesting.
And she's growing in California in the early 2000s. Okay. And so she's into what you would think as the all-American Californian kid from that time.
Sure, of course, exactly.
It's punk music and all that stuff. But she doesn't fit in with her family's trying to push her in one direction. Right. And even amongst her classmates, she doesn't really fit in. So she and her other odd-fitting kids actually make their own group.
That's great. Yes. Because I was going to say, with the teen years are rife with feeling like you're not fitting in anyway.
Exactly.
But then it's coming from all directions here.
Exactly.
And that can be tough. But it sounds like, she's just unique of spirit, and she's doing her thing. Spin Magazine.
Yes, exactly. It's awesome.
So did she feel like she had to give anything up at any point? Or that she was losing anything by, like, her parents' approval if she didn't become the doctor they were hoping she would become?
Yeah, to the point that when she went off to college, when she was declaring a major to start with, she had to check off marketing.
Okay, gotcha.
Instead of English.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Because marketing would be approved by her family, who was also, not only that, they were also mostly funding her education.
Of course.
So there were several things, like she had to check several boxes, like, get them, apply for the most amount of scholarships, get the most amount of money that way. But also her family, all of her family is pulling their resources together to give her the money so that she can go to school.
Right.
And so the expectation is that
you have to be pursuing this. If
exactly.
we're funding this, you have to be pursuing. I wonder if they're happy now that she's a graphic novelist. Do you think they are?
Well, what she is she works for, she's the founder of she's a journalist at National Public Radio.
Perfect.
And she is the founder of the Runcible Spoon Food Sign and the co-founder of the DC Art Book Fair, because she currently lives in Washington, D.C.
I mean, it sounds like she's doing great.
Fine. She lives in Washington, D.C. In the arts, which is where she was naturally gravitating towards.
That's cool.
It's where she was meant to be.
That's really cool.
So I'm looking for something because I want to say, so the question that would come up all the time is, what are you? Oh, so she was being called that she was whitewashed. Whitewashed, so that she was acting too white.
Oh, okay, I see. For how she looked, she was just acting too white.
Too white, because she was into pop and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so her crew, motley crew of punk kids, simply called The Group.
I love it. I love it when a band of kids who just aren't necessarily meshing with everybody else find each other. Yes. And it makes the best team.
Exactly. Cool. And it doesn't have to be a big one either. It doesn't have to be a big group of kids. It could be a group of two.
Yes, absolutely.
2 people is still a group.
Awesome. Obviously,
it's a duo.
I have a thing for good people. So this kind of ties into her allies and her group. They Called Us Enemy, I was so relieved when helpers and allies showed up. Yeah, because it's such a vulnerable story, especially told from the child perspective. But in yours, in I Was Their American Dream, you saw those kids? Were there any other great community members, teachers, allies that she kind of brought up that were just great, helpful people? Didn't care about
exactly
identity at all?
More like when she, and this was actually a shock to her, but I thought it was great because I myself am what is considered an other.
Okay.
Of Puerto Rican descent, mostly. There's all sorts of stuff because to me, the typical American is just default. It's a melting pot. White. So it's like.
Or are you saying okay, gotcha.
No, for the general immigrant, the American dream is a white person, blah blah. But to me, from all that I've read, to me, an American is just a combination of all different things. Like the actor Lou Diamond Phillips, he's American. Yes. He is Native American. He is Irish. He is this. He is the other.
That's what I think of too.
That's an American.
And when you're doing genealogy, which I love to do for the library, anytime anybody comes in with a genealogy question, I'm like, let me look at it. And so that's what I think of as an American too, because it's just this meshing of all sorts of people come to America, and that's everybody's lines are all crossing.
Exactly.
But the default white hangs on, I think.
Unfortunately, from my perspective, right? Unfortunately, it is changing. Whether we all like it or not, it's going to change because change is a constant.
Right.
Which is an awesome thing. So What was the question?
Oh, sorry.
I got lost.
So, yep, I interrupted you. So, any of a person in here.
Good people. So when she was in high school, everybody identified each other and themselves with "What are you?"
Okay, so that was like a conversation they regularly had. That was interesting.
And in her community, that was completely acceptable, and it was how you expressed to the other person who you were, where you were coming, and you would make a connection, and you would share with them your personal thing from your family, which sounds
if that came out of my mouth, I would feel like I was insulting someone just being very rude.
And it all depends on tone.
Okay,
and yes, sometimes it depends on who's asking the question. Okay. Because I get it. I get that question, or I have gotten that question. So especially because my first name is of Middle Eastern descent.
Right.
But I'm not Middle Eastern.
Okay.
So it's like, but your name's one thing, but so it's all sorts of confusing. So what I liked was that eventually she didn't even know, and she was surprised when she went to Syracuse University when none of these. And then she goes from a very diverse group of people to basically a white college town.
Area. Okay.
And nobody's interested in asking her, "What are you?"
Oh. And if you're used to connecting with people through that.
Exactly. So she's like, what happened here?
Yeah,
which leads back to her feeling that homesickness, which she was totally not expecting.
Right.
Because she wanted to be around people who like punk music and all of this like truly American stuff from her perspective. But she was missing her Filipino rice. She was missing all this sort of stuff. Then she moves to Washington, D.C., and that's when she finally realizes that it can be perceived as a rude question.
Okay, gotcha. Interesting. And so actually, I think it does sound like a rude question because it's what, not who. You know, like it's weird. It feels objectifying and strange. And,
are you a thing?
If everybody started asking each other, maybe there'd be more digging. You know, like if someone were to ask me, well, I know because I've done my ancestry, so I could say like English, French, Irish. There's a whole mixed pot.
Yes.
And I go right down that road. But
mine is just Spanish, some native Indian from Puerto Rico, and some African there somewhere, but I don't know what the ratios are.
That's right, I know. Because I know. We talked about this. Doing the ancestry just freaks you out.
Just doing the DNA thing. I'm not giving my DNA to anybody.
You're smart. You're smart. I was too curious, and curiosity killed the cat, you know. But it is cool. Okay.
Yes.
So, let's see. Any pet peeves about the book? Story, representation, dialogue? Or style of the pictures? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What?
I loved it in general because, full disclosure, I personally prefer, in general, novels.
Okay.
With chapters
as
and
opposed to graphic novels.
As opposed to graphic novels. So I've had to develop a taste for graphic novels. Mm-hmm. And in the process, learn some of the different styles and also appreciate where I read somewhere that a graphic novel is like a portable piece of art.
I know. They're so cool.
Which is so great.
Yes.
Right? So I love because the style, some of the things is, for example, going back to representation.
Yes.
So Filipino people, not necessarily all of them, but they tend to have dark hair.
Okay.
So in this graphic novel, they're represented with orange hair.
Interesting.
But it's still straight-ish.
Okay.
But whereas because she's Filipino-Egyptian, she actually has wild curly hair.
Right.
And hers is represented as dark. And so, but I thought it was interesting because it didn't fall into trying to do it too racial, falling into the stereotype necessarily. Yes. So I like that. Plus the art, I thought the art was awesome.
It's very colorful.
It's very colorful. It's bright. Lots of blues and turquoise. I think I loved
bright it. Orange.
Bright orange. I loved it. Oh, I loved about this book that it's interactive. So it has interactive art.
Which, it's at the library. So I'd say don't tear pages out of your library copy. But if you purchase a copy for yourself, tell us about the ones you can write on and take out.
So you can, she, when she was young, she made signs. And so there's a page where she actually made a copy of her sign. And you can pull out that page and she explains to you how to cut up the page so you can make it into your very own sign.
That's really cool. I love it.
There's also recipes for some of the meals that she makes.
Love it.
Some of the Filipino meals that she makes or that her family would make. There is talking about the code switching and everything.
Yes.
There is cut out this paper doll of Malaka, then cut out the clothes and accessories, dress her up to dramatically transform her and alter her personality.
Oh my gosh. Doing all that in one day would be tough.
So I love that part. And it was intentional. So on the flip side of the pages, there's nothing that you would miss out by taking out those pages.
Okay, gotcha. That sounds awesome. What a great book.
Yes, that's awesome.
All righty. Well, I'll put that on the list after this one. Let's talk about a much more tense read.
Yes, yours.
And I know you've read this one, so you know it's tense as well.
Yes, I've read this one. I loved it. So this book is described as a stunning graphic memoir. And you already said you obviously agree.
Yes.
And it allows us to experience the forces that shaped an American icon. So that being George Takei. Which of the experiences that you read or you saw in the novel would you say affected George Takei to use his star status to be as vocal an advocate as he is?
Oh my gosh. I think, first of all, being in internment and having that experience, it didn't come across, especially when he was little, as I was saying, they were sort of sheltered and protected by their amazing parents.
Like, especially when they were on the train and the mom was just taking
She's
stuff
taking all, just as if, if you go on a trip and you bring the bag for the kid and you've got the sticker book or whatever, same thing, except they're going to a incarceration. They're going behind some barbed wire fences. And the kids really aren't detecting anything. They're still in their safety zone, you know? But I think throughout all of the time, he starts to be aware that there's a rift. Some people are angry with each other. He'll sense that. He'll sense that they're strange that there's a tower where a gunman is. That's a little strange. He has conversations with his father when he's a little older. And I think that you start to see that influences advocacy later. Now, when he becomes an actor, and it touches on this, there was this moment when they said, do you want to be in Star Trek? And this would be great representation for Japanese Americans. You're the face of this Starship Enterprise, and you're going across the galaxy, and tons of different people are there from different ethnicities, and they're all working together. And he thought of that as being really important, and it was that he would be able to represent Japanese Americans and on the big screen, and everyone would know about him, and that the character was good and noble and strong.
Because before that, a lot of times Asian American characters would be. It was almost sort of like when Native Americans were always cast as the bad guy. Right,
exactly. So having that opportunity and taking on that role, I think put him into the spotlight and then his history kind of meshes with it, right? So he now is very aware of what happened in history, and he has this wonderful TED Talk on how he loves the country that once betrayed him. So just as he grew into an adult and saw what happened and became aware of it, and then he was able to use his influence for advocacy. I think it was it's just how he grew. I don't know if he hadn't been in Japanese internment, if he would have ever become an advocate. Maybe he would have just been an actor, or maybe he would have completely taken a different path.
Exactly.
It could have been anything. It just was a perfect transition from his...
Almost like meant to be, despite the fact that it was not a good thing.
Exactly. It was obviously difficult, but it informed his life, and then he informed people around him, which I think is incredible.
Cool. So this book shows us the upheaval that the Takei family, along with the rest of the Japanese American community, had to endure.
Yes.
How does the art show the difference between the adult and the child's perspective?
Oh my gosh, it's so good. So the artist, wait, let me go back here so I really remember and give credit to the artist, because I don't want to. Okay, our Harmony Becker is the artist, and she did a wonderful job. There's some really realistic illustrations with the adults, and then there's some darker ones that show history or like war moments, and then you'll see these lovely childlike, cartoonish pictures with stars around the kids' faces.
You were saying like it was manga-like.
It does feel manga style when it's the kids being gleeful.
Yes,
and
because it has the big eyes.
It has the
like
big
in manga.
eyes. And so say it's like Christmas, and even though they're in this camp, it's Christmas, and they're kids, and Santa came, and they're smiling. Or this one time when they were going out because their dad was the block manager, and he brings them out on the Jeep. They have to go on an outing outside the gate, and there's these faces with the big eyes, and they're just cheerful, and the cheeks, and there's stars all around. So you see that from their childlike perspective, like, this is so fun, and you can feel it when the illustration changes like that.
And it's also awesome because it's not as colorful as I was the American Dream. It's just black, white, and grayish tones. So the fact that she was able
to like, changes enough.
The style changes and convey all that emotion.
So good. Yeah, I thought it was wonderfully illustrated.
Okay. So I also have a thing for good people.
Yes.
I call them heroes or sheroes.
Yes, of course.
Let's be fair.
Yes. I love it.
So you were touching upon it earlier. Tell us about those people They Called Us Enemy.
So they do talk about like great politicians, but honestly, I'm going to go with the person who delivered the books.
Yes. Because after all, we're
librarians. We're librarians. So there's just this guy who's bringing the books, and he shows up with his truck, and he brings the books, and he's not drawing lines in the sand or caring about,
what color you are, where your people came from.
I like those people. Here he is. He's got the pickup truck, and he shows up with the books. And his name is Herbert. The next month on that same date, Herbert was back at Manzanar with more books. He went above and beyond for the internees, delivering books, donations, personal effects, and once even a loved one's cremated remains. Like, he just showed up for the job. And I want to be that person if anything horrible is going on around me. Just be that person who is helping.
Yeah. I call those people, like, I have read a lot of World War II, which this really is as well. But most of the time we read about what's going on in Europe. Right. So there's not as much literature about the home front and much less about the Japanese internment.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't feel like there is. Maybe I haven't gone out of my way to look for it. I did recommend that other graphic novel to you about
that's referred to in here.
Is referred Korematsu.
Yes.
That's referred to in because that was also a real life situation. And I'm looking forward to reading that one.
Me too.
So I call these people who like step up and are there, like I gravitate toward those people. Those are, like I said, those are my heroes and my sheroes. Right. Like when I read about how whole Danish community was able to like protect their whole Jewish community. Exactly. I'm like,
those are the people we want to hold up.
Exactly. Those are my people. That's who I want to be like.
Exactly.
Those are my heroes and sheroes.
Absolutely. Me too.
They don't consider themselves, or they didn't necessarily consider themselves being that courageous or that brave. Right. But they were.
But they're doing what they can too. Yes. With like, he has a truck, he can get some books, he's going. Exactly. He's going to do it. So, all right. That was definitely a person that I was very happy to see in there.
Okay. So what was my last one? Here we go. This sounds like a timely graphic novel for the times. Is there any other books like it that you would recommend?
Actually, so one that I was really excited about popped into my inbox, and it's coming up. So a read-alike for this one that I think would be amazing is We Are Not Free by Tracy Chee. And it's in the works. It's out in 2020, and it's about second-generation Japanese Americans. And it is historical fiction, and it's written in short stories from different perspectives, and it shows how their relationships were changed when incarceration happened. And so it's definitely going to be a close read-alike to this. I think anybody who's interested in this, and like you were saying, have we read a lot of, I haven't read much on this at all. I don't know if I've read a teen book about Japanese American internment ever. But again, it might be what I'm finding or not finding, or what's on my radar or not on my radar.
Exactly what comes up to us. There might be more stuff out there we just don't know about it
right.
because it doesn't.
And this one got a lot of thrust because it's George Takei. So, you know, the media was behind it
exactly.
and everything. They want to push it.
Exactly. That was why it's like, and reading reviews about, they called us enemy. Like I was reading the Washington Post review on it,
right? And
it was precisely that review was precisely lauding the fact that he's using his spotlight to shine
exactly
on, you know, even the situations now that we see every day,
absolutely
bombarding us from all sides.
Yes, and So Tracy Chee, that's We Are Not Free, and that will be out in 2020. So that'll be a wonderful read-alike. If you're interested in the subject, which I think everybody should be reading, I honestly think this would be great, timely read right now in American classrooms. It's a fast read. Kids can all get into it.
Exactly. It reaches all different levels.
Exactly.
Your manga lovers even.
Right. And, you know, they're in the camp, and it's like, okay, well, what camps do we have now? How is it similar? What's going on? You know, it's a good way to look at history and talk about today.
And talk about now, and hopefully try to find ways to avoid repeating history.
This is painful. I mean, just if you read through it, you're going to see, and it would be nice to not repeat that.
Yeah, it would be very nice.
Wouldn't it? It was really bad. I mean, honestly, I was crying. I was crying at lunch. I'm sitting there at lunch like,
Yes, it happened to me too. I was reading. I was like,
I know.
Oh yeah. So by the way, take out the Scott's tissues for this read.
Really,
there will be parts that will make you cry.
Yes, and then go listen to his TED Talk because that also is wonderful. Yes.
So
all right.
What's up next?
Next is Courtney will be back. We're going to be reading classics that we missed. So Courtney said she never read Little Women. So she's going to read Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And I am going to read 1984 by George Orwell. And we'll see if we like them or what. We're going to have a quick convo about those. There are teens who are constantly looking for the classics. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation. Remember, if you get a chance to answer our 2 questions, those are, did you have siblings? Were you similar to them or different?
And did you have any nicknames? Good, bad, ugly, indifferent?
And likewise, if you have any questions about reading recommendations or library life, please write to us at teentitletalk@gmail.com, and we'll read a few of our listener responses next time.
Thanks for joining us for Teen Title Talk. This podcast is brought to you by the Derry Public Library and Derry-CAM Derry Community Access Media, empowering independent voices. As always, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, Google Play, and Player FM. Just search for Teen Title Talk. Don't forget to hit follow so you can hear the latest episode. Our theme was created and performed by Banded Starling. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.